Hello everyone. In this tutorial, we're going to learn how to communicate with on-screen text or labels using code. When we left off, we had this very simple program that allows us to add llamas to the scene tree, and then we can remove those llamas from the scene tree as we click the Remove a Llama button. But now we want to update this placeholder text up at the top of our header, so that it keeps track of how many llamas are on the screen. So let's figure out how to do that. I'm going to close this and come over to main. And one of the things that we're going to need is a custom function that we're going to write ourselves that actually keeps track of the number of llamas. So I am going to push these functions down, and I'm going to create a new function, and I am going to call it update llama count, parenthesis, colon. And now I have to indent my code because I'm going to write some instructions in here. The first thing that I want to do is tell Godot what label do I want to communicate with. And what I can do is use my code hinting. If I put in the $, Godot is showing me the path to all of the nodes in my scene. And actually the one that I want to communicate with is the label named header text that's inside of header. So you could see it's header/header text, and I want the text of that to be equal to something. And specifically I want to say there are, and then I need to get a number. And the number that I want is the number of llamas that are inside the body color rectangle. And so I am going to say body dot get child count. I want the number of children inside of body. Now, importantly, because I'm putting this in a label, it needs to be a string. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to turn this number into a string, just like that. And then I'm going to say plus space llamas, period. So there are string body, get the child count, turn it into a string, and say there are blank llamas. That's what this function does. It's the only thing that this function does. Of course, if I run my code, nothing happens. We're actually not using that function. And so when my code initially runs, I want to use the ready function. So what I'm going to do is actually manually call the update llama count function. I'm going to say update llama count function, and watch what happens when I do that. Boom. Up at the top here, I can see there are 0 llamas. And that happened because the ready function runs one time at the beginning of my code. And let's see what happens when I add a llama. Unfortunately, I'm adding llamas, but my count is not changing. So let's close this and let's fix that. So I called update llama manually with my ready function, but I also want to update my llama count. I want to change that text when I add a llama, as well as when I remove a llama. And so I'm going into each of my functions and I'm going to manually call update llama count. So let me run this. And when I add a llama, it now says there are 1 llamas, there are 2 llamas, 3, because our function update llama count is running each time that we add a llama. And each time I remove a llama, very good, it is adjusting the count. Now, one problem we have is that when I add 1 llama, grammatically this isn't correct. It should be there is 1 llama. And so we need a little bit of extra code to make that grammatically correct. And we can do that using an if statement. So let's come into our code here. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to say var. And just like we did before, I'm going to say number of llamas. And I am going to get that from get child count. I'm getting the child count of the body node. And now here's where I'm going to put in some if-then logic. I'm going to say if number of llamas is equal to 1, then I want to do something special. I'm going to say I'm going to change this to there is 1 llama. But if that's not true, I want to do something else. I need to type in the keyword else : and I'm going to copy this whole line of code. And here I'm going to say there are llamas. And I'm going to save this and then run it. And we should see there is one llama. There are 2 llamas. And of course I can remove those. Now we have another problem that some of you may have discovered. The remove button is still active when there are 0 llamas. So we need additional logic to disable this button when there are no llamas to be removed. And so we have to prevent this from happening. And so we can use some if-else logic to help us work around this problem. And so how do we do that? Well, we're going to use another function called the process function. And I'm going to say function process. Just like the ready function, process comes built in. And this one takes a parameter called delta. We don't need to worry about that right now. Just go ahead and type in delta. You could call this D. It doesn't matter. By convention, we call that parameter delta. And again, what we need to do is find out the number of llamas. So I'm going to say var again, and I could call this variable anything that I want, but I'm just going to say number of llamas equals, and I'm going to go inside of body, and I want to say get child count. And then I'm going to use some if logic again. I'm going to say if something is true, do something. So I'm going to say if number of llamas equals 0. That means if there are no llamas, do something. And what do I want it to do? Well, I want it to disable my remove llama button. So I'm going to say header remove llama dot disabled equals true. I'm going to change the property of my remove llama button. And if that's not true, I want to do something else. What do I want to do? I want to make sure that my remove llama button is not disabled, so I'm going to say disabled to false. Now, what's special about the process function is that it runs every chance the processor gets an opportunity. In other words, it runs repeatedly over and over again. And so our code now is constantly going to check, do I need to disable the remove button? Yes or no. And so let's go ahead and run this. And notice by default, our remove llama button is disabled, and it becomes abled as soon as I add a llama, because there is more than one, or there's more than 0 llamas in body. So I can remove that. When I do, the remove a llama button is disabled. And there you have it, folks. How to use if-else logic to control what text is being displayed up here at the top, and to control the logic of when to disable and re-enable a button in your project.